Is Valorant going to be getting its very own show just like Arcane? This is now the most popular question asked by the Valorant community after asking for the replay system was successful. While Riot hasn't confirmed anything, I did a little bit of research, built some theories, and I can give you guys an answer that should be close to accurate. And if you are a Riot dev watching this and know any of this to be true, please give us a tiny hint in the comments. Alright, so let's talk about Valorant's show. I've divided this video up into 3 parts. Are we getting a show and how can we be sure? What will be the main storyline of the show? And what will the animation of the show look like? Alright, let's get started. Are we going to be getting a Valorant show? The short answer is yes, it is very likely to happen. And the reasoning behind it is simple. Valorant has detailed lore. Not simple lore, detailed, very detailed. We can make a series with the lore that we currently have. The only problem is that there are going to be a lot of gaps. I think Phoenix's lore story is the only one that is basically complete from start to finish. A movie just dedicated to him and his story is something that can work right now. But I don't think we'll be getting Agent movies specifically, but instead a more general lore story just like Arcane put into a show. Then again, Arcane does follow the story of Vi and Jinx, along with the broader conflict between the Topside, the Undercity, and Noxus. So we may get a show that follows the story of one or two agents specifically and has it connected to a broader theme. As important as the game is to Riot and the community, we know that the developers are heavily focused on and do occasionally push out more and more lore in Valorant, sometimes in small snippets using the patch notes to release them. Other times they have their own dedicated events like what we saw with the recent Omega Earth attack, with the Why We Fight Back cinematic. The more Riot pushes out the lore, the more story we can get from the agents and the universe of Valorant. And the biggest reason that we don't have a show yet is simply because we don't have enough lore covered or released or even scripted by the developers to launch it into a full-blown show. For context, League of Legends was released all the way back on October 27, 2009, and the show Arcane, which is based on the game League of Legends, was released on November 6, 2021. 12 years after League was launched, it got its very own show based off the champions in the game. And not just one season, but a second season released as well a few years later in 2024, with each one having 9 episodes each. Now, I don't play League or follow the game in any way, other than listen to the songs that are released for it because they are pretty good sometimes. So I don't really know how exactly the lore was released for the game. I'm not sure if it was released bit by bits in small snippets and occasional cinematics like Riot does for Valorant, or if they had something more structured with scheduled lore releases and concrete backgrounds with longer and more detailed cinematics. If you do play League or follow the lore, maybe you could shed some insight on that in the comment section below. But the reason I'm bringing up League and Arcane is to talk about how it did take over a decade for Riot to release the show, and for Valorant, we did just hit the 5-year mark, so we are a bit early for any big show to be released covering the lore of the game. Now, this doesn't mean that we do need to wait another 7 years to get a show for Valorant either, because we also need to remember a factor of making the show which the community doesn't immediately think about: the cost and profitability of making such a show. Because remember, Riot is a business. Making a series, especially an animated one, costs a lot of money. And the best way to explain this is by simply comparing it to their Emmy-winning show, Arcane. Arcane was apparently initially budgeted for a 5-season show, but as we know, it did end off after the 2nd season. According to Variety, Riot spent a total of around $250 million on the entire show, which includes all of the episodes, the marketing, labor costs, and everything else. The seasons themselves costed around $80 million for the first one and $100 million for the second one. These numbers are from 2021 and 2024 when the seasons were released, so we can expect that it will be more costly now. And League of Legends itself, I'm not too sure how accurate these numbers are, but Game Boost notes that the game hit its peak revenue in 2017 at $2.1 billion US, and remaining over $1 billion in revenue ever since, with 2023 being noted as possibly lower. So the game itself is making a shit ton of money for Riot. I don't see Riot spending over $1 billion annually just to run League, so I'm sure they did have a lot of money from their net profit that was used to make Arcane. Also, an important note is that Arcane was actually not profitable for Riot, despite its success and winning multiple Emmys. It was obviously a good investment for League and the company as it brings in a community outside of the game, while also giving active players another thing to look forward to. Something that can be replicated into a series for Valorant, which is already making several $100 million in revenue annually. with 2025 potentially breaking the 1 billion mark. So on its face, I think financially, Riot is in a good position to work on a Valorant show, although I do believe growing the player base and marketing the show outside of the game itself will contribute a lot to its success upon release. But all in all, given Riot's heavy investment and time into the lore of Valorant, it's safe to say that we can expect a Valorant series to come out sometime in the future. As for the timeline, I wouldn't bet on any time soon if I'm being completely honest, unless Riot already has a lot of Valorant's lore scripted out in the backend which they can release. But my guess is somewhere along the lines of 2028 or 2029 as the release date. Okay, let's move on to what the storyline or plot of a series made for Valorant would be about. Right now, Valorant's lore is pretty scattered in some ways. We have 29 agents with Agent 30 coming soon, and while many of these agents have connecting storylines in the past and present, there are still many agents who have stories that don't connect to any of the others and are a mystery. Just a few to name would be Clove, Valorant's only immortal agent, Astra and her connection to the Astral Guardians who defend reality and space-time, Cypher and his family's backstory, Breach and his backstory with his criminal family, and so on. It would be difficult and honestly take too long to make a show about Valorant which actually covers all of their stories, but there is one plotline that can be used which is commonly seen, and that would be the conflict between Alpha and Omega Earth. By setting the baseline of Valorant's show as a conflict between these two worlds, we open the doors to have every agent involved on both Alpha and Omega Earth. We also make it possible for the many organizations to be brought in as well, such as Kingdom, Atlas, and the Scions of Hourglass. As for which agent would lead the show, this is where it gets a little tricky. One of the most popular agent lore stories that we have is the lore story of Omen. His story goes far back to when he worked for the Scions, got turned into a phantom after a failed assassination on Viper, his revenge plot against the Scions, and then his general involvement with the protocol as they deal with Omega Earth, which is actually not that large compared to some other agents. Viper would be another candidate to lead the show, as her history is also tied in closely with Omen's. She has worked for Kingdom before alongside Vice, and her involvement with Omega Earth is now starting to grow, although it is her Omega counterpart which is in the spotlight, but I do see her Alpha version stepping out very soon. Sage is another possible lead, with a very rich backstory on her ability to heal and resurrect people, how her past is tied with her ability to save lives, and what exactly is the cost of her using them. Why does she become weaker the more lives she saves? And in KO's alternate timeline, Sage is actually not even seen as a healer because of how deadly she is in war. And that's a side of Sage that we actually haven't seen before, other than the Revelation cinematic from her Omega counterpart. The last two possible leads that I can see are Brimstone and Chamber. Brimstone because he's simply the first agent of the Valorant protocol and the founder. He knows the stories of all the agents, he's worked for Kingdom, he's involved with the Scions and Omega Earth, and he does have his own individual backstory. Chamber on the other hand could be an interesting choice of a lead character, simply because his past and present lore is very much covered in secrets. A lot of his past we don't know about. He is the only agent who is friends and works together with his Omega counterpart. He basically helped worsen the relationship between Alpha and Omega when he sabotaged the reactor on Fracture, and we know that the two Chambers have pretty different stories in their respective worlds. I'm not too sure how Vi and Jinx were chosen as the lead characters for Arcane. Maybe someone who actually knows the lore could mention it below if their lore is more popular than others, or if they always were these lead figures in the game story. My take is that if and when we do get a show for Valorant, it'll be something like Viper being the lead, but also putting other agents in the spotlight to get some of their backstories as the show progresses. And it should be structured in a way where we get to see what the lead agent is doing on Alpha Earth, while occasionally transitioning to either the same lead agent on Omega Earth or another agent, and seeing what's happening from their perspective as well. I think that would make the most sense. We get to see both sides of the story, why Omega Earth is fighting Alpha Earth, we get to see their desperation, the loss that they suffered, and so on. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And last but not least, what will the animation of the show be like? I think this one is fairly easy to answer. While we do have Riot occasionally using different animation styles when they release their cinematics, there is one that they use most frequently, which you can see in their episode cinematics in the past. The most recent lore cinematic that was released, I kind of noticed it was a lot more polished and cleaner than previous cinematics. The detail was increased, it was sharper, And the scene where Viper fights Brimstone, I couldn't help but notice how similar Viper is to Vi from Arcane here. The way she fights, her facial expressions, and even her voice actor as she catches her breath in pain, it's so similar to Arcane, and I do think that given the success of that show, I don't see why Riot would deviate to an animation style that's a lot different than what they normally use. Sometimes when Riot does release Valorant cinematics, the animation style does look kind of different from the usual one they use. And I don't know if you guys noticed, sometimes the agents themselves do look kind of weird and we don't have the usual looks and facial expressions that we're used to. I definitely think the community would agree that the animation in this cinematic was top tier. And hopefully the cinematics continue to build using this style because it looked amazing and they really were able to convey the right messages and emotions through the details of the agents and the environment. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, things you guys want to see and what you think the show should cover. Don't forget to drop a like if you enjoyed the video and make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out on future lore and update videos as they are released. As always, thanks for watching and I'll see you all in the next one.